Welcome to the Deep Dive, a segment of the Olive Grove podcast. We're the place where we take a whole stack of information, sift through it all, and pull out those key nuggets of knowledge and insight just for you. Our mission? Well, it's really to give you a shortcut to being well-informed, maybe spark some aha moments without, overwhelming you. Today we're doing a deep dive into a biblical narrative that's, well, incredibly famous, but often, I think, profoundly misunderstood. Jonah chapter 2. We'll be drawing from a really insightful study. It's titled MCS Jonah Chapter 2, and it offers a, let's say, unique perspective on this classic story. What's fascinating here, really, is how this ancient account seems to paint a picture of a profound future event. And right at the heart of our deep dive today is a question that might surprise you. Most people just assume Jonah was alive inside that big fish for 3 days and nights, right? But is that really what the text suggests? Is that the point?
That's such a critical question to ask because, the answer really shifts how we understand the whole purpose of the story. The common picture, Jonah just surviving in there, it's miraculous, sure, but it might actually overshadow the deeper intention, the reasons in the scriptures. This study argues pretty compellingly, I think, that the main message isn't just, wow, God can keep someone alive in a fish, but something much bigger. Something pointing forward.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's dive in. The study isn't saying God couldn't have kept Jonah alive, right?
Not at all. God's power is limitless. That's a given. And there are even some, historical anecdotes, though maybe questionable, about people surviving being swallowed. But the study says the focus isn't God's ability here. It's the purpose of this specific story.
What is it pointing towards?
Exactly. If you look at the Old Testament, you see it constantly setting the stage, foreshadowing the New Testament, foreshadowing Jesus. And this study positions Jonah chapter 2 firmly in that camp. It's presented not just as a miracle, but as a direct, vivid picture of Christ's resurrection.
So the survival itself, while amazing, becomes kind of secondary.
Secondary to its role as a prophetic sign, yeah. It shifts the focus from just any miracle to a very specific, theologically massive one.
And the study connects this directly to Jesus' own words.
It does. That's where it gets really solid. Matthew 12, verse 40. Jesus explicitly says, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish,
so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." I remember that verse.
Right. So for that parallel, that sign of Jonah, as Jesus calls it, to really land, Jonah couldn't just be, having a bad 3 days.
He couldn't just be unconscious or uncomfortable.
Precisely. The study argues he had to have actually died to properly prefigure Jesus' actual death and his actual resurrection from the grave. Otherwise, the comparison weakens significantly.
It wouldn't have the same weight, would it? If Jesus just fainted and woke up, that's not resurrection.
Absolutely not. The power of the sign depends on that reality. Death, then new life. So the argument is the same must be true for Jonah's experience to serve as that sign.
Okay, so let's look at the text itself. Jonah chapter 2, verse 1. It starts, "From the belly of the fish, Jonah prayed to Adonai, his God." Adonai being Lord or Master in Hebrew.
Yes. And the timing of that prayer is key.
Right, the study points out you can't pray when you're dead.
So logically, he must have prayed either just before dying as life was slipping away, or perhaps after being miraculously revived inside the fish.
Let's hold that thought. Verse 2 then says, "Out of my distress I called to Adonai, and he answered me. From the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice."
And Sheol.
Yeah.
That's the crucial word there.
Okay.
Throughout the Old Testament, Sheol consistently means the grave, the pit, the realm of the dead. It's not just poetic language for feeling bad or being separated from God's will, though it can encompass that feeling because one is dead or dying.
So the study pushes back against just spiritualizing it away.
Strongly. It argues for the physical reality. Jonah is crying out from the place of the dead. It's a statement about his actual condition, his terminal state.
Okay, then verses 3 and 4 add more layers. "For you threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood enveloped me. All your surging waves passed over me."
Intense imagery, utterly overwhelmed.
And he says, "I thought, I have been banished from your sight, but I will again look at your holy temple." Banished from God's sight.
Which the study highlights as a common biblical way of saying someone has died. Cut off from the land of the living, cut off from God's presence among the living.
But it's a statement of finality.
Yes. And notice the water imagery, too, being overwhelmed by waves. The study connects that to ideas of judgment, chaos, even death itself in ancient thought, like baptism, representing death and then new life.
Wow. Okay, then it gets even more graphic in verses 5 and 6.
It really does.
"The water surrounded me, threatened my life. The deep closed over me, seaweed twined around my head.
Seaweed twined around his head. Think about that. That doesn't sound like someone just uncomfortable inside a fish. That sounds like a body sunk to the bottom, tangled in debris.
Like a corpse.
Exactly. And then I was going down to the bottoms of the mountains to a land whose bars would close me in forever.
The grave again. An inescapable prison.
Unmistakably the grave. The language is stark. Finality. But then the turn.
But you brought me up alive from the pit, Adonai, my God.
Boom. There it is. That's the resurrection picture. That's where it moves beyond just a weird survival story into this incredible foreshadowing of Jesus.
Life from death.
Life from actual death. And, that's such a comfort for us, too. That same power that raised Jonah, that raised Jesus, is the power that promises our resurrection one day, to live with God forever. It's a core hope.
So, back to the prayer timing. If he was dead, when did he pray? Verse 7 seems to address that.
It does.
As my life was ebbing away, I remembered Adonai, and my prayer came into you, to your holy temple.
Right there. As my life was ebbing away, he knew he was dying.
It was on the brink.
On the very threshold. And in that final moment, he cries out to God. It wasn't a prayer from safety. It was a desperate plea from the edge of death itself.
What does that tell us about hope?
It tells us hope extends right to the very end. That even when everything seems lost, God is still listening, still reachable. And that's important for you listening right now. Maybe you feel like you're at an end, or maybe you have loved ones who seem far from God.
Mm-hmm.
The story reminds us God is always waiting for that cry for mercy, just like he heard Jonah. We just need to tell people he's there and trust him. It's about his persistent grace.
Okay, before we get to the end of the chapter, let's pause for a moment. We're having a great discussion here on The Deep Dive, which, as you know, is part of the Olive Grove podcast. And if you're finding this exploration of God's Word and His workings insightful, I really want to recommend a book. It's called Misfits for Jesus. True accounts of people experiencing Jesus. It's full of incredible, real-life stories about what God is doing through Enduring Freedom Ministries or EFM. Just amazing accounts.
Yeah, Enduring Freedom Ministries does fantastic work. And part of their mission right now is actually establishing a food pantry in Jerusalem, in Israel, providing real practical help to people in need there. It's a beautiful way to show God's love in action.
It really is. So if you feel led, please consider donating to Enduring Freedom Ministries to help get that food pantry up and running in Jerusalem. Every bit helps make a tangible difference. And definitely grab the Misfits for Jesus book on Amazon. It'll encourage your faith, seeing how God works. Okay, let's get back to Jonah. So Jonah cries out as he's dying. Then verses 8 and 9 show this huge shift in his heart.
A complete turnaround.
Those who worship vain idols give up their source of mercy, but I, speaking my thanks aloud, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation comes from Adonai.
You can almost hear the conviction there. He recognizes God alone as the source of mercy, of salvation. And he talks about a vow.
What vow do you think that was?
Well, the study suggests that likely in that moment of dying, Jonah finally yielded. He probably vowed something like, okay, God, if you save me, if you let me live, I will go to Nineveh. I'll do what you asked.
A vow made under extreme duress, but seemingly genuine.
And God, in his incredible grace, giving Jonah what he absolutely didn't deserve, honored that. He gave him a second chance.
Which mirrors our own salvation, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right.
When we come to Christ, we're essentially making a vow, too.
Yeah.
We're turning over control, making him Lord. It's not just about avoiding hell. It's about surrendering our lives.
And like Jonah, we need to take that vow seriously.
We really do. Count the cost. Be prepared to follow through, to live in obedience. Don't take God's grace lightly.
Okay, so that brings us to the very last verse of the chapter, verse 10, the culmination.
The big finale, you could say.
Then Adonai spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out onto dry land.
And there's the picture, crystal clear. Jonah, who was dead according to this interpretation, is brought back. He physically walks the earth again.
Just like Jesus, centuries later, would physically rise and walk the earth after his crucifixion.
Exactly. The foreshadowing is complete. It's not just some random weird event. It's a divinely orchestrated picture of the resurrection.
It raises a question then, doesn't it, for us, for you listening?
It really does. If God can use something as, unusual as a giant fish to fulfill his prophetic purpose, to bring about resurrection,
What can he do through you? through me.
Right. If he can use a big fish, he can certainly use us and all our complexities and limitations for his amazing purposes. We shouldn't underestimate what he wants to do through ordinary people.
So wrapping this deep dive up, what's the big takeaway? Jonah chapter 2 isn't just about a guy surviving inside a fish.
No, it's so much richer. It's a profound, direct prophecy. It's painting this incredibly vivid picture of Jesus' death and his resurrection.
It's a story about God's amazing grace, his willingness to give second chances, even when we run the other way.
And his power to use absolutely anything, any circumstance, any person, even a fish, to achieve his ultimate plans.
It shows that even from the deepest depths, from what looks like the absolute end,
God can bring new life. He can bring purpose out of despair. No situation is truly hopeless or final when God is involved. His power to redeem and restore is ultimate.
So here's something maybe for you to think about this week. Consider those situations in your life, or maybe things you see in the world, that feel impossible, like a dead end, a grave. Could it be that, like Jonah's time in the fish, God might be using that very circumstance to reveal something deeper, to set the stage for an unexpected return to dry land?
Could there be a second chance, a new beginning, waiting even when life feels like it's ebbing away? It's worth pondering how God might be working, even in the darkness.
Definitely something to reflect on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Jonah chapter 2. We hope it gave you some fresh perspective. And please, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the Olive Grove podcast on YouTube so you don't miss our next exploration. We'll see you then.